All right. What are we doing? What are you leading us into here?
All right, first one can guess the name of that band who gives us a quick text. Man, you're going to get a prize like no other. Little snippet. Don't know if the band's together yet. Got to be honest, not my favorite band. Got to be honest, I can't even name a song.
No,
But
you've
it's
stumped.
appropriate for our time together. So if there's anybody out there,
Stumped me.
but if you don't know, okay, here we go. It's our theme: Judas Priest.
Judas Priest. There you
You've
go.
heard of that band? I don't even know if they're around anymore, but
I feel like
my era would know it.
I feel like you spent hours thinking about this, but I feel like it's probably 3 minutes. But I'm always impressed with the.
When you start going, okay, what kind of music for Judas?
Sure.
I mean, it's like,
yeah. Well,
yeah.
Welcome back.
If you're going to deal with hanging out with bad people, who do you think of? Bad company.
Maybe, yes. Bad religion.
Bad, see, it didn't take hours. So, hey, everybody, welcome to Facebook Live.
Yes, welcome back, Pastor Mark.
This is proof that we're live.
We are live. We obviously missed you last week, but not a ton because Pastor Matt was on here, and we had a great. I mean, I would have missed you if there was no one on here. That would have been really lonely. But we had a great discussion last week. You can still catch them; they're all archived. So if you ever miss one, you can always go back and catch up. Last week was about worry. This week we're on the Judas train. We're on the pathway. So we'll dive into that in a minute. But happy to be here. Couple quick announcements.
Dude, wait.
You go.
When you said happy,
Happy to be here.
I thought you were going to say happy birthday.
Is it your birthday?
What?
Wait, is it your birthday? Is it really?
See, we are doing live, baby.
Why should I know that? This is Shelby's fault. Shelby did not give me any indication that it's your birthday today.
It isn't today. It was 2 days ago.
Oh.
But that's
on Sunday?
No, Saturday.
All right. This is a mess. Do you know when your birthday is? Do you know mine was the 9th? You missed mine by 10 days.
It was?
9/9.
Okay. I'm writing it down.
43 years young.
You're a birthday buddy.
I am. My wife's is on the 25th.
9/9. Okay.
9/9/80.
Your wife's is the 25th?
Yeah.
Well, I opened a can of worms, didn't I? I'm on the hook now.
Yeah, we're expecting a lot of cards. Your wife's a good card sender. She sent us a very sweet card recently.
Did she?
Yes.
Did I sign it?
I don't remember. But we should dive in. We've gone way off the rails. See, we haven't caught up in a week, and so this.
Oh, I know what card she sent you.
Yes.
Yes. Okay.
It's our poor little dog passed away, so we won't need to go to that rabbit trail. But it was very sweet.
I was aware of that card.
Oh, very kind. But on happier notes, Judas? No, that's not happier. Announcements, things coming up that are exciting. Alpha is launching soon. We're doing Alpha Online again, Tuesday nights, beginning October 17th for Alpha Online. And just to give like a lens, because if you haven't done Alpha, you can be kind of maybe confused about what it is. You made a great recommendation that, on Sunday, that just go to YouTube and Google Alpha and see a promo trailer. But in our group, we had people that had gone through Alpha before and wanted to like soak it in again and really kind of go deeper. We've had people that have been Christian for some time and we're like, I've never really thought about this and I want to get a perspective. And we had people that weren't Christian, who were in the place of kind of seeking and exploring and want to find a safe place where like, where can I learn more about this in a different kind of environment? So there's not one size fits all for this. So it's not just for X, Y, or Z. So I was really impressed by that and loved that. And it led to a lot of good conversations. But
And we've had people join with a couple of people at their house even. So it doesn't have to be you alone. You could say, hey, ask a friend and you two together log on or whatever.
Yeah.
That's kind of fun too.
There's a couple of us all having the same conversation. Let's dive in. It's video based. It's really cool. So yeah, if you've not done Alpha, I would check it out. I was obviously I've gone through it. You've gone through it, Pastor Mark.
Yeah.
It's great. So I'm excited to lead that again, Tuesday, October 17th. And again, grow groups, places to get connected, to plug in, and to be a part of community. Don't be doing this alone. It's hard to stay rooted alone. So find your people. Maybe I'll be your people. I'm available. But let's dive in. Give us a quick recap from the message out of John this last week, and then we'll dive in with some questions.
Okay, well, we have the sobering topic of Judas sitting at the table with Jesus, Last Supper, upper room, final gathering with Jesus and the disciples, and Judas is identified by Jesus as the betrayer. So it's sobering. And so, what are some things to learn from this event that only John includes, by the way? And why did he include it? The others didn't, but why did he include it? What are we supposed to get from it? And so when Jesus washed the disciples' feet and talked about, not all of you have had a bath, which means spiritual renewal, he was referring to Judas. Then he says, I'm not referring to all of you. I know those I have chosen, but this is to fulfill the scripture. He who shares my bread and lifts up his heel against me. I'm telling you now, before it happens, so that when it does happen, you will believe that I am he. I tell you the truth. Whoever accepts the one I accept, accepts me. Whoever accepts me, accepts the one who sent me. After he had said this, Jesus, troubled in his spirit, testified, I tell you the truth. One of you is going to betray me. So at that point, you can imagine the room panicking, a lot of self-examination. Who is it? Looking around, but not looking around. Doesn't seem like they knew, because the text says in verse 22, the disciples stared at one another and were at a loss to know which one of them he meant. So we talked about how the real temptation or the bait of Judas, if we take it, is duplicity. That Judas was the ultimate duplistic person. He could be one way with one group and one way with another group. He could appear as a disciple of Jesus to where no one recognized that he wasn't. And he could also be meeting with religious leaders and doing a backdoor deal to betray Jesus. And duplicity is something that, we're all going to face because culture puts that pressure on. We layer up, we pretend, we present in a way that's maybe not accurate, truthful, varying degrees of that. Obviously, this is the most significant. It would be the equivalent of somebody going to church and acting like they're worshiping, reading their Bible, and they don't know the Lord. But everybody thinks they do. But it could have gradations too, how we present in life and appear like everything's okay with somebody, and really it's not. And so we're living in duplistic situations. That's all Judas stuff. And I put that there because I think when we give it that kind of sobering label, it's a little more like, don't tolerate that. That's just not okay. That's like Judas stuff. And we know what happened to him. He betrayed Christ, ultimately committed suicide, and it's a terrible story. So that was one point. And then the other point was just, the dynamic of Peter leaning over to John and saying, John asked Jesus who it is. And Jesus said to John, well, whoever dips the bread with me or whatever, then that's him. And so we have this whole thing. And at the very end, Jesus says, go do what you got to do. And so Judas got up from the table and left. And the broader topic there is, why did he leave? He left because the whole thing was over. This was the night before Jesus was going to be betrayed, because Judas knew that timeline. That there was going to be probably an insurrection, in terms of not insurrection, but a jury that's going to be faulty. And anyway, the gig was up. The crowd was over. The miracles were done, and the ship was going down. And Judas said, I ain't going down with it. I'm going to be smart, pragmatic. These guys can do that. I'm not going to do it. So he left. And so we talked about how self-preservation, or a me-focused, me-first perspective is a Judas perspective, ultimately. So talked about what that looks like as well. Sorry, I went a little longer than normal on the recap, but those are both very nuancy, but also big too, in terms of their application. Because we're all prone to selfishness, we're all prone to winning, we're all prone to me first. everybody else second. That's Judas stuff, if you really want to label it.
Yeah.
So anyway, that's what we talked about. It's one of those messages where you give, and it's pretty quiet in the room because it's not, hey, all right, let's sing a song when we leave.
Yeah.
It's like, okay.
Yeah. Hopefully this will be more lively than that. This won't be just awkward silence as we both contemplate the Judasness in all of us. Well, first of all, one of the things I think is so important was normalizing at some level and of who Judas is and how common some of his actions are. Now, again, that's hopefully the extreme case, and we see what happens and how, okay, the next step, and here you end up in this place. But the steps leading up to that are very normative and things that we all fall into. And it's just good sometimes. It's easy to, caricature a person like Judas and be like, Judas, there he is doing his thing, and robbing the reality of this was a real person with real emotions and thoughts and mind and heart. And who knows what steps led to him going down that pathway, making those decisions. But I think it's important because if we write him off, then there's nothing to learn from that. And we can all be holier than Judas and, oh man, I can't believe he did that. Yet the reality is, as you laid out in the message, there are layers to this that we need to be on guard with. And the first one, this idea of just being duplicitous. And I thought another astonishing thing that I had never considered before this message was that no one in the group recognized it was Judas, that Judas was the problem. And yet he's been with these guys for years. He's been serving and sitting at Jesus' feet and sleeping and hanging out and eating. And this guy was in the circle and in the day-to-day lives. And yet it didn't occur to anyone that this person is way off the rails. And that's scary to think of that reality.
Yeah, and he was a treasurer. So they trusted him financially. Yet we saw earlier in our study through John that he was stealing.
Yes.
He was skimming. Again, acting like everything's okay and cloaking it up and some way taking it to where they wouldn't notice, and maybe got a little extra on an offering and took a little off the top. And
yeah.
So, it's he was good in a very bad way. But it's so much of that it's no different than somebody participating in some sinful activity online or whatever, and then coming out of that like it never happened.
Yeah.
And covering it up.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, that's Judas. And if we really put it in that context, it's like, wow, that's kind of significant. That's what John was trying to highlight.
Yeah.
You can be so close and so far away. And I haven't been in ministry for decades, and I've experienced this, with not only in myself, the duplicity, but people. I've had people I thought were fully locked on, and then push comes to shove, they're nothing to do with God. So very interesting.
Well, and those are the two layers I want to go down. So I want to pin for a second that idea of being duplicitous and how are we able to be these different peoples in different situations. So I'll go there in a second, but the first part is just I have seen too in the midst of, let's just say, the church, how damaging that can be when you are with people and you're serving together in ministry and you're doing things and one person goes rogue, or they were rogue the whole time, or whether it's a pastor or a small group leader or an elder or just somebody you're in group and community with, and I see the ripples and how painful and hard it can be when it's the idea, I thought I knew them. I thought I knew this. And yet here they are. And yet we've spent so much time, and it makes you question everything. And so it can lead to such damage and destruction within community.
Yeah, it's hurtful. I often think of, how the disciples felt.
Yep.
I mean, it's the text said when he went to say, go do what you got to do, they still didn't know what he was saying. They didn't know if he was going to go get more food or give to the poor or whatever. But they knew what he looked like in Gethsemane. And, I'm reminded that Peter cut the ear off of one of those Roman guards. He was so angry. He probably wanted to charge Judas too. I would imagine their jaws just dropped.
I agree. And I think just the speed of everything that then unfolded thereafter, almost like didn't even give them space to be like, as shocked as they were, it all started falling apart, right? The dominoes fell at that point. And so what a jarring. So not only do you lose the person, but one of you is the
Yeah.
reason that
Yeah, he left the team too. He didn't just leave Jesus, he left the team,
left the team. So one, just a reality that happens, and those can be painful times, and those can be painful things that really can jar us, and that happens, and that's hard. The second thing then is not just to dwell on the other, but then again, you said this is about ourselves and focusing on ourselves and asking ourselves hard questions at times of what picture of myself do I paint for the world, and what's the reality of that? Why do I paint that picture? Like who is it that I want to be, and who am I trying to project out to be, and what's motivating that in me? And the easy example over the last, decade plus is social media, which gives really easy pathways to present pictures of ourselves to be a certain way. And that's really challenging. I often said that I am really glad that passed me by to a degree. Not that I'm so old, but had I had that when I was in college or in my early 20s, I know exactly what I would have been doing, because it's what I was trying to do with my normal life, presenting myself to be someone I wasn't, someone with confidence, someone, you know what I mean, who had it all together, someone that had all the answers. I was really smart, and somebody, you know what I mean, that, oh, nothing bothers me, right? Like all the things. I'm like, oh, I would have tried to paint the best picture, and yet how easy it is for us to hide behind those types of things. So I think that's a big thing, is that self-examination of ourselves. What picture am I painting?
Yeah, I mean, it's culture, right? What decisions went into what you're wearing today? Clothes, what kind of car you drive, what kind of haircut you have, what kind, I mean, it's just, and not that it's all wrong, but it can be.
Yes, when those things start becoming majors, and those things, again, we're doing that in a way to look, we all get dressed up and want to look nice when we go to church or go out to dinner. All right. Like, sure. Like you're not going to show up like slobs. We understand that. But I think the thing that we have to check is when those things are part of a larger picture we're trying to paint of our lives that may not be accurate. And the issue there becomes is that those things will collide at some point. And the more we spend energy trying to mask it, very often the less energy we're trying to spend on trying to grow and heal and mature and fill those gaps, right? The more I present that I have it all figured out and I'm the smartest Christian who's in 4 Bible studies, the less I'm probably spending time growing and building community.
Yeah, it's hard because the things that we just mentioned, you made decisions on what you're going to wear and all that. Nothing inherently wrong with wanting to look better than worse. But it's hard to turn that off spiritually if that's the road we're used to going down in every other part of our life.
Yeah.
And that's the hard part, because when you really look at Judas, he was a smart man. I mean, the decision he made was pragmatically smart. He saw that this whole thing, the market's going to tank.
Yes.
Yeah. And so, I'm going to pull my investment, because if I don't, I'm going to lose everything, and probably even my life. Because he knew he did a deal with these religious leaders that were going to kill Jesus. And he made the connection, and those immediately connected to him will probably go down too, because who else had a contract on in his life? Lazarus. So he's starting to see a pattern that if you're completely connected to Jesus, you're going down.
Yeah.
So he's anticipating the market is going to collapse. He's taking his investment strategies. He's getting money. He's getting out while he still can. That's smart in today's world. Now, it doesn't include faith. He was missing the overall spiritual, mission and redemptive life of Jesus and going to the cross and all that kind of stuff. But that decision is not unlike any decision that would be made today.
No, but again, the thing what I just was so convicting to me is that decision began 3 years earlier. That was built over long seasons of not really knowing Jesus and not really being open to, like, that began because of a lack of relationship and with Jesus, and because of that disconnect and that distance. It's an easy decision to make because I don't know who this guy is.
Mm.
And I think I was thinking of a funny story of, like, we at my previous church, we came to recognize as leaders that there are, and especially after I went through seminary, I'm like, there's so many things I learned in school that to me are very basic, but I didn't grow up in a Christian household, so I never learned these basic things like, oh, Matthew was not the first gospel written. Well, it's first. Shouldn't it be the first? Well, no, it's actually. And you're like, oh, how did I not know this? There's a really, I think, helpful Bible 101 that I feel like, seminary like filled in some gaps of, like, I just never knew that. I'm like, oh, this would be really helpful. Like, really helpful things to help us understand the word and understand Jesus. And so we tried several different ways to offer these, like, Bible 101 classes, things like that. No one signed up for it because no one thinks they need it, right? There's no self-reflection of, like, oh, do I need to? We don't ask for help. We don't want to seem like, I've been going to church for years, I need something like this, or this thing could help edify, help me grow. No, that's for other people. And yet we would have conversations with people in our community, and you're like, we're not on the same page. Oh, you're missing a couple you need to actually backtrack a couple steps. You're way deep in this. You need to actually start from the beginning. And I don't know why I just drew that parallel, but just Judas never took the time and took the steps. So by the time you get to this point, that's an easy shift for him to make.
Yeah.
Rescue that story if I've gone off the rails on that one.
Yeah. Well, presenting, I think so. The solution is work on transparency. The solution is work on authenticity.
Yes.
The solution is recognize if you're making excuses for duplicity, like, well, it's appropriate, or I don't want to be rude, or, you're presenting like something's okay in a relationship and it's not, and you're unwilling to risk to have the discussion. So you're presenting in a way that it must all be good, and avoiding. Those are all little nuances of Judas, and that the more we can take, and it's going to feel risky. It's going to feel risky because, Judas wanted to hide, when Jesus looked at him and says, do what you got to do. He's like, I got to get out of here quick. Yeah. The window's closing. He already knows, if I don't do this now, I'm done.
Yeah.
So
operating out of fear.
Off all that. Yeah. There's so much there.
Fear. And so one of the things you brought up, okay, so like we need to examine ourselves. We don't want to be duplicitous. We don't want to be presenting to all the people around us a different version than who we are. And so that involves humility, taking a risk, being authentic, being transparent, having community that's helping speak into our lives, because the reason they're blind spots is because we're blind to them. We don't see some of the gaps we might have, and needing people to help speak into that to help us grow. But one of the things you mentioned is one of the signs that we might need to really pause and examine is, are we the same people in all the different situations of our life? So I'll give Shelby credit. This is a good Shelby question of, how do we do this? How are we not massively different at work versus church versus small group versus the Little League field versus the guys we went to college with versus our families, right? And on. Like, okay, we find ourselves in a lot of different scenarios often, and hopefully with a lot of different kinds of people, that hopefully we do live lives. We're not just insulated and we've got our tiny little perfect community that all looks like us and thinks like us, and we can all just, like, no, hopefully we've extended ourselves. But now I can see in my life there's gaps in who I am in all those different areas. What's the answer? Is that okay? How do we?
The answer is 3 green ones. No.
Excellent.
So I personally would start with, what about me does no one know? So, right. And then now you get into a porn addiction, or you get into something that's really hidden, that is only you and God know.
Yeah.
Spouses don't know, good friends don't know, whatever. So I would start with taking inventory on that first, and either repenting before God, maybe getting help, maybe sharing with one person that's trusted to get accountability in place or whatever. So that's kind of the baseline.
Yeah.
But then past that, it's going to, I think it's appropriate to be, you know, transparent about everything with everybody. I mean, that's just at some point, it's a different work environment. Your grow group is a very different, safe, spiritual place to be known than it is in a cubicle at your work. And so, and non-believers versus believers plays into it. So, those are case by case, and I don't think it's complicated. I think I think when you're being duplicitous.
Yeah.
And if you're making excuses for it, then just try not being duplicitous and see how it feels. If it's super scary and what you trust God in stepping into it or whatever. But I would work out versus come out and try to work in. I would start with the closest people and move from there. That's what I do.
And even the example you gave, whether it's the things that no one knows about me, whether it's pornography, whether it's anxiety and depression, whether my marriage is in trouble, or I am completely stressed out by finances.
Gambling.
If no one knows those things and we're keeping them inside ourselves, that's where we can start unraveling. And that's where the gap starts growing between who we're trying to be and who we are. And as pastors, what happens, what we have seen in our lives, I'm sure you have as well, is by the time that stuff gets revealed, it is just so far imploded people's lives. Whereas if you just would have taken a risk to be honest with someone, hey, I'm struggling with this. Hey, I'm in trouble. Hey, I'm disconnected on this. That would have begun a pathway of healing and growth and people surrounding you and community, which we talk about every single week, community, people being around you, but the hiddenness of it and that thing starts to become a mountain now and it becomes insurmountable. And that's where it becomes so much more destruction lies in those wakes. And I mean, there's so many, I would just go to personal experiences, so many couples in our church, if they would have just told us somewhere 2 years ago, we're struggling in our marriage, we wouldn't be at crisis or everyone's been blindsided because you just announced you're getting divorced. Like, we thought you had a perfect marriage because you never once shared with anybody in and around your community that, hey, it's not perfect. Hey, we're struggling.
Yeah, I've known a few people that and done a few memorial services where there were suicides, and the common theme is no one knew.
Yeah,
we wouldn't let anybody in or share it with somebody, and so everybody's shocked, and then they blame themselves. They should have known, and all those things. But and interestingly enough, Judas commits suicide.
Yeah.
So that kind of stuff is super important to have somebody. It's sobering, and
it's so much of our natural tendency is to hide, is to protect. We're all very image conscious. Of course we are from the very beginning, like from growing up. We want to look cool and be popular and wear the cool clothes and not stand out too much, but just right. Like it's just so inherent in our DNA of this desire of self-preservation and wanting to present. And again, the beauty of the gospel is a God of the universe that sees all of that, all those things we're trying to hide, and yet loves us so deeply and continues calling us sons and daughters and chosen and blessed and gifted. And it's like, no, not when you have it figured out, in spite of you figuring any of this out. Like, if we can hold on to that, that's where hopefully the confidence comes from to say, okay, if that's my identity, then I can be honest that I'm not the smartest guy in the room and I'm not perfect and I am struggling, because it's not going to change my actual identity.
Yeah. And there's a responsibility, I think, on behalf of the church, because if we make the place not safe, then people cover up.
Yeah.
It's a place,
that's a big one.
Yeah. And so why would I expose myself when everybody's more spiritual than me? And so people don't like to go to grow groups because they don't think they'll have the right answer, or and they've misread the purpose of grow groups.
Yeah.
I think I shared this, Alcoholics Anonymous, one of the first things they say is you be able to admit that you're an alcoholic, right? So, hi, I'm Mark. I'm an alcoholic. Hi, I'm Mark. I'm an alcoholic. And every time you stand up or say anything, you go transparent.
Yeah.
Don't try to cover. Well, I'm not that bad. I didn't drink that much, and just all that kind of stuff. So, and there's value in there. But if only one person in the room saying it and nobody else is saying it,
Yeah.
then good luck, Chuck. That's it's not gonna work. So it's got to be safe too. It's kind of both sides of the coin. I would say that Judas, though, probably. Well, I don't know. I can't speculate. I know Peter had a temper, and if Judas would have gone front page there for a second, he might have jumped across the table. So I don't I don't know how safe it was.
How do you broach the subject? I may have
Yeah.
just sold out our
Yeah.
guy.
Remember, he did have that knife with him all the time.
Yes. I mean, no, but I think, and we're running out of timer, so we won't go too far into this, but you just bring up such a good conviction of, is our community, whether our small community, our home, our community group, our grow group, and our church, is it authentically a place where broken people come together under Jesus, or is it a place where a lot of people seem to have it all together and act perfect and blah blah blah? And what am I doing to contribute to that? Top down, like our leadership down, how are we contributing to being a place of like, nope, we're gonna mess up, we're broken people, we're trying to figure it out, we don't have all right, like how are we creating those environments in and around our lives to provide space for people?
Yeah, washing feet, man.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and he said, do as I have done. So we're going to cover it this week too. He was giving them marching orders because he's leaving,
Yeah.
and how to treat one another. So there's a bigger piece there. But yeah, it's a sad story, but there's truth we can take. There's some insights that we can hold up. Are we doing obvious Judas stuff now, cloak and dagger stuff, spiritually speaking, hidden life, hidden addictions, hidden whatever?
Yeah.
Okay, learn from Judas, go front page, quit hiding.
Yeah.
And then secondarily, all these other nuances of little baits that we can get along the way that rope us in, we pay attention to.
Yeah.
So,
well, no, and it's again, we're not trying to get everyone into a grow group so we can check some box. We just believe so deeply that we need places and spaces where we're able to connect and begin building relationships where we can feel like, okay, I can trust these people around me. And if you're not in the right grow group, great, find another one. Like find places where you can do this. And whether it's even those of you watching online who may not be connected to the community at all, really, that's where we're trying to create some of these spaces for you. And again, we offer pastoral care and counseling as well. Online, we can hop on a Zoom and just begin that conversation. And what you said, Mark, how important it is to say like, hey, I'm struggling with this. I need to say it out loud. What I'm going to solve all that, but that's the place where now the healing and the work can begin to happen and finding the right communities.
Yeah.
All right. Should we end with more Judas Priest? No, I'm kidding. Thank you all for tuning in. If you have anything else, any further questions, conversations you want to continue, please reach out. You can email me, amin@pccsc.org. But thanks for joining us. We'll